As of June 16th, 2022, Batman Returns, Tim Burton's second Batman film, will be 30 years old. Because what is time really? And despite Warner Brothers executives listening to smear campaigns regarding the film's overall tone and family friendliness that caused them to jump ship from Burton to Schumacher for the next two installments, Batman Returns, I personally think it's safe to say, is pretty much the most universally beloved of the Burton Batman films. This, at least, is definitely true on my end. I find myself watching Batman Returns the most between the two, quoting and reciting lines from Batman Returns the most between the two, and just overall enjoying the aesthetic and character depictions the most between the two. Which, if you saw my video celebrating the 30th anniversary of Burton's first one, shouldn't be of any surprise to you. While I appreciate everything that film did to make me a Batman fan, and a Prince fan in retrospect, there was something about Batman Returns that little Laurent just loved. No, the alliteration there wasn't intended, but I'm not entirely mad at its existence. Now, considering I was 3 going on 4 when I first saw Batman Returns, and that I still feel the same way about the film now that I'm 33 going on 34, I figured it was worth a bit of reflection. What all played a part in how much I enjoyed the film as a child? What all has evolved considering the type of Batman fan that I currently am? Am I over the fact that the plot of the film literally came from a 2-parter of the OG Adam West series? No, seriously, the plot of Penguin running for mayor of Gotham City was legit pulled from the show, and I was just as surprised to find that out as you were. But after doing said reflecting, I'm actually quite surprised at how much of Batman Returns is not only the bedrock of how I interpret Batman media, but superhero media as well. So much so that I actually want to share with you readers the overall role Batman Returns played in my geekdom as a child and how it still finds itself relevant in my life 30 years later. Let's begin. Hey readers, Laurent here, offering you analysis and perspective on your favorite bits of geek and pop culture media. And there are multiple ways that you can show some love if you end up picking up what I'm putting down here. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon. There are multiple tiers that range from $1 to $20 that give you access to things such as copies of my video scripts, early video releases, and discount codes to my merchandise store and a whole lot more. Right now, there's currently a goal set where if we reach $1,000 a month on the Patreon, I'll give a wine-drunk review/critique of the Venom sequel, Venom: Let There Be Carnage, a movie that I promised myself I would never expose myself to after doing so with the original. And if you want to know why, then I highly suggest you check out the wine-drunk review/critique I did on the original in order for you to get a taste of what you'll be expecting. Though, in all honesty, according to how much peeps have been talking about it, I might need to add a remake of my first Wine Drunk Venom video to the Carnage pool. And make sure I have enough wine. I'm gonna need at least 3 bottles if I'm doing them back to back. But Laurent, how much to get you to talk about Morbius? $2,000. $2,000 a month and it's Morbin time. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll get a heads up on whenever I post a new video. That's the syllabus. Now, on to the lesson. How much do I love Batman Returns? Well, if you've seen my video celebrating the 30th year anniversary of the 1989 Batman movie directed by Tim Burton, then you already know that I've had a great love for Batman Returns pretty much the moment that it was released. I was 3 years old, about to turn 4 a bit over a month later when the movie was initially released in theaters, and my wait between watching the first Batman to seeing Returns was, I believe, a bit less than a year. But when I found out another one was coming out, I was ready. I watched every trailer. I watched every behind-the-scenes HBO special promoting it back when HBO used to do those. When I tell you that I was excited to see this new movie a month before I was about to turn 4 years old, it was no exaggeration. And as far as little Laron, and even adult Laron real talk, has proven, it was not a disappointment. Batman Returns was the first movie I ever saw in a drive-in, probably because my parents realized that I was too young to watch a movie in the movie theater and didn't want me to disturb the other moviegoers, and it was also the most impactful to me between the two Burton films. After all, there's a reason why, after my initial greeting, that me talking about Batman Returns was the first video on this channel after deciding to become an actual YouTuber over 6 years ago. Except don't go back and watch that video, it's fucking terrible. But yeah, that Christmas of 1992, it was Batman Returns. Everything. The original twin-size Batman Returns bedding, the Batman Returns toys, including the repurposed Penguin from the Adam West Show because they thought the movie Penguin looked too scary, the Batmobile that turned into the rocket with the press of a button in the center. I even got the Batboat he used to race to Penguin's hideout at the end of the third act. And while I didn't get the official videotape until later on, you best believe we recorded it when it premiered on HBO. But outside of all that, Batman Returns stood out to me more in comparison to Batman '89 for multiple reasons. Its art deco stood out to me in comparison to the first one, and the color scheme consisted of blacks, blues, whites, and grays, a combo that I always found a bit more attractive than '89's use of browns. The fact that it told its story during Christmas also helped in the unique factor, and the fact that the Return suit is my favorite suit of the Burton films. To little Laron, Batman Returns felt like a more grown-up Batman story than the last one, and he greatly appreciated that. But while all of that still applies to why adult Laron loves Batman Returns, there are other aspects that factor in that as well. So let's talk about the one that most of y'all kinda already figured is the one that left the most lasting impression on me. The Bat and the Cat. Batman Returns was the movie that taught me that Bruce and Selina were meant for each other. While I definitely thought Vicky Vale was going to show up again when I saw Returns in theaters, I wasn't really that pressed to see that Bruce was single instead. Instead, like most who were introduced to the mythos of Batman through the Burton films, I was introduced to Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, and I was incredibly thankful for it. Yes, you heard that correctly. Batman Returns was the first time I was introduced to Catwoman. For a lot of us millennials, we were introduced to Batman through either one half or a combination of the Burton films and the Bruce Timm animated series of the early 90s before getting into the comics, which, mind you, came immediately after the release of Returns. That means for a lot of us, the only version of Selina that we knew of was Michelle Pfeiffer, supernatural origin story and all, before her movie visage was used to represent her in the animated series. Now, when it comes to Burton vs. Catwoman, you know that I've talked about her so much on this channel already. I talked about how her subversion of the beautiful all along trope was done in a way that gave the character the anti-patriarchy vibes she has to this day in my video comparing her arc to Cheetah's in Wonder Woman 1984. I've talked about how said anti-patriarchy and pro-feminism vibes evolved the character in both film and comic media to reflect more anarcho-socialist vibes in my video about the propaganda that's present in Matt Reeves' The Batman. And that's not even mentioning her being up there with Wonder Woman and Constantine when it comes to bisexual representation, or just being a queer icon in general, because of the reclamation of her sexuality and femininity for herself in the midst of patriarchy first and foremost. So much has come from Michelle Pfeiffer's portrayal of Catwoman that has shaped both the character and pop culture for the better. And it almost didn't happen because of how Sam Hamm originally conceived the character back when the sequel to 89 was about her and Penguin looking for hidden treasure. According to Daniel Waters, the writer of Heathers and Demolition Man, when he was tapped on the shoulder to revise Hamm's script, Selina was originally depicted as, and I quote, back to the way comic books in general treat women, like fetishy sexual fantasy. Thankfully, that original depiction of how Sam initially pictured Selina changed with age when he was tapped on the shoulder by DC Comics to write Batman 89, the comic miniseries based in the Burtonverse following the events of Batman Returns that ignores Forever and Batman and Robin, and wrote the much anticipated return of Pfeiffer's Catwoman. But while the shift helped bring a focus to the social aspects Catwoman is now known for, Pfeiffer portrayed her brilliantly as a woman who deals with just as much of a struggle with duality as Bruce. Not to mention that the take we see of Pfeiffer beheading the mannequins with her whip was the first and only take that was, and I feel like that's very important information that you need for your everyday life. There's also seeing her internalize her feelings when it comes to enacting her revenge on Max Schreck, her emancipation of patriarchy as a result of it, embracing her femininity, and trying to find herself now in the midst of it all. She has such a great hand to play after having to mulligan for who knows how many years before her transformation, that as a result, she is overwhelmed with choice.
Why are you doing this?
And while she doesn't want to be pampered or coddled now that she's finally behind the steering wheel of her own life, something that even modern day comics and certain film iterations have established about her since Batman Returns, these aspects about her grow even more complicated when she begins to develop feelings for Bruce Wayne. Now, 3 to 4-year-old Lauren didn't know that the reason Vicky Vale wasn't in the story was because there were failed contract negotiations with Kim Basinger. But 3 to 4-year-old Lauren was able to figure out from the dialogue that Bruce and Vicky were no longer together and appreciated the casual name drops to get the point across. Unlike some people who like to forget a character in a franchise continuity they write for exists. And thanks to that, 3 to 4-year-old Lauren also realized that Bruce and Selina were drawn to each other. And while he did understand, even at the most simplistic level, that their identities made it difficult for them to truly connect because they were at odds, it was clear that they brought something out of each other that other relationships didn't.
You got kind of a dark side, don't you?
No darker than yours, Bruce.
While Bruce respected and enjoyed Vicky in a way that fit the story of 89, he never really went out of his way to try and involve her in his life. And while that's pretty much on par with Bruce's personality, considering how devoted he is to his life as Batman, especially since it was Alfred that suggested he reach out to her if he truly believed that she was special, Bruce felt compelled to be around Selina. She was always on his mind. For perspective, Alfred had to talk Bruce into letting Vicky in after saving her from Joker.
She is quite tenacious.
You're right about that.
And if I may say so, quite special. Perhaps you could try telling her the truth.
But Bruce was willing to go to a costume party hosted by a dude he despised just for the possibility of seeing Selina again.
Although, Selina Kyle might be there.
The care Bruce takes in containing his secret identity when it came to his past relationships was something he and Alfred argued about constantly.
Security? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm sitting there working and I turn around, there she is. Oh, hi Vic, come on in.
Yet he was willing to expose said identity to Max Schreck just to try and talk Selina off of a cliff he thought she was going to jump off of.
Selina, please.
When I tell you that 3 to 4-year-old me could tell from this movie alone that Bruce loved Selena. Loves Selena, actually, because his feelings for her are just as strong in the comics. And you can already imagine how giddy I was learning that once I started getting into them. The comics, I mean, not them. Though I wouldn't be surprised if I found out Bruce and Selena were that couple pursuing bars looking for a third. Batman Returns was Baby Laron's gateway drug into Bruce and Selena's supremacy that honestly only got better with age. And by age, I mean more stories and knowledge under my belt. Ever since being introduced to the idea of them as a couple in the movie, I watched in real time Bruce learn to love and cherish Selena as she is without the constant need to fix her, and Selena being able to acknowledge and validate her love for Bruce without having to give up her independence and philosophies in order to do so. They learn from each other, they validate each other, and they help heal each other. And Batman Returns is responsible for showing me that they had this connection from jump. But while this is definitely an important aspect of Batman Returns that I keep near and dear to my heart, there's another about the film that I weirdly understood even at 3 to 4 years old that's kind of carried over 30 years later. And that's the development of old Oswald Cobblepot himself, the Penguin. I think it's safe to say that the amount of care that Burton and DeVito used to develop Penguin is pretty much responsible for my appreciation for what the biz calls Raimi villains. Don't get me wrong, he was no Doc Ock or Sandman. Everything that Batman Returns did to showcase that this was a manipulative, conniving, and overly horny individual constantly on the verge of becoming a sexual predator was there.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
But for some reason, 3-year-old Laron going on 4 was able to see how Penguin was playing Gotham like a heart from hell, just as accurately as Batman was able to, and found that fascinating. When it came to superhero movie villains before Batman Returns, I just had Joker, Lex Luthor, and General Zod. And out of all of those villains, Joker and Zod were the most direct with their villainy. Once Jack Napier took a dip in the Ace Chemicals plant, he was all about poisoning Gotham with Smilex. Once Zod and his gang were freed from the Phantom Zone, it was immediately about world domination until he found out the son of Jor-El was alive on Earth. Even Luthor's plans to jumpstart the big quake at the San Andreas fault line, despite taking a bit of stealth and strategy to change the missile's coordinates, was pretty much the plan from the start, despite Superman eventually entering the picture. Penguin, however, felt more layered to me. Yes, using Max Shreck's connections to get the names of the firstborn sons of Gotham so that he could drown them was the plan from the beginning. But seeing him try to handle that, the fact that Batman caught on to him early on, and juggling finally having a taste of the life his parents denied him thanks to Max using him for his own means as his mayoral candidate to get his power siphoning power plant up and going, introduced me to the concept that villains are capable of being emotionally complex. That complexity left such an impression on me as a kid that out of all of the characters in both Burton's Batman movies, Penguin's was the one I ended up impersonating the most at 3 to 4 years old. No, seriously, the one Thanksgiving dinner my parents decided to host the year it came out, 4-year-old me decided to just pretend to be the Penguin the entire time. Eating, speaking, the mannerisms, the finger placements for the flippers, everything. And I only remember this because not only did my mom catch it on camera, but also decided to record my one-man performance of every one of Penguin's lines in Batman Returns, including his death. No, I'm not sharing that footage. Not because I'm embarrassed of 4-year-old Laron's displays of attention. I am a Leo after all. but it's mostly because I don't have the means of converting VHS footage to digital. Also, I don't own any of my home videos, so you're gonna have to take my word for it. Then again, depending on how long you've been watching me, something tells me that you don't find this tidbit of info about me surprising at all. Once again, I'm not saying that Batman Returns' Penguin is deserving of sympathy. Oswald Cobblepot was an entitled, sexist asshole.
You lousy minx! I ought to have you spayed! You sent out all the signals!
What I am saying is that it's thanks to how Penguin was handled in Batman Returns that I think he became the precursor for exploring the emotional dynamic of villains more intently if they have the depth to explore. And while I'm absolutely sure there would have been ways it could have been tackled otherwise, I'm kinda convinced that the way Sam Raimi tackles comic book supervillains in his movies is partially possible thanks to the complexities of Danny DeVito's Penguin paving the way for the medium. And even if that isn't the case, it definitely left an impression on me and how I handle villains in my own works.
They wouldn't put me on a pedestal, so I'm laying them on a slab!
While I can't speak for everyone, Batman Returns played an incredibly important role in not just how I digest and interpret Batman media, but just media in general. It taught me that there's complexity in pretty much everything, and that highlighting it is just as important as the stories that are pretty straightforward. Whether it be love and romance, deciding if it's worth it or not to let someone in, or the development and motives of a villain, Batman Returns was, is, and forever will be my favorite live-action Batman film. If for nothing else, for showing me the importance of not just focusing on the masks that everyone wears, but also the importance of the face hiding behind them. And while little Laurent may not have completely understood that concept when he first saw Returns, it was clear that it was a prominent feeling in his spirit. Otherwise, it wouldn't have grown as big, full, and thriving as it did 30 years later. But I digress, readers. Your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comments section below what you thought of Batman Returns. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class, an aspect about the film that carried on with you since the first time you watched it. Whichever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. A huge shout out to my patrons both big and small for helping make this channel possible. Make sure you check out the card at the end of the video to join, or click the link to it or any of my affiliates in the description box below. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.